Welcome to Shortcuts to Mastery. I'm your host, Maria Henning, and in my universe, life is for growth and time is for bending. So hop in, my friend, buckle up, and let's get into it. What's up, my friend, and welcome to Shortcuts to Mastery. I'm so excited. We're here re-recording actually the first episode, and getting ready to share it with you. If you don't know me yet, hi, my name is Maria Henning. You'll get to know me a lot more throughout this episode, since this is my story, and we'll be diving all into that and how I got to where I am today. And where I am today actually is I'm a human design and gene keys teacher, reader, coach, app creator, business owner, and this podcast is part of my body of work that I've created and that I am creating in the realm of human design and gene keys and business and personal and spiritual development and beyond. So I'm so excited to have you here. Before we get into the story and time and all of that good stuff, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the name of the podcast. So if you are a human design person, then you might know what this means. And by the way, if you don't know what human design or gene keys are, don't worry, there are episodes coming. They might possibly already be released if I have recorded them. By the time I release a bunch of episodes at the same time, they might still be in the recording process, but they will be out there, and there will also be accompanying free masterclasses to go along with those so that you can, if you're new to these systems, really get a great foundational understanding of what they are and why they are so freaking amazing and why I've built an entire life and business off of them. But going back to the name, if you do know about human design, you may have come across this terminology before, but Shortcuts to Mastery specifically is a Karen Curry Parker interpretation of something that she calls wealth themes, essentially the way in which each of the 5 human design types can generate wealth according to their type. And for manifesting generators, which is what I am, the wealth theme is shortcuts to mastery. Of course, this isn't like, a new concept for Karen necessarily. We do hear in literature around how many gens are here to kind of take shortcuts and, skip steps and all that kind of stuff. But I just loved the shortcuts to mastery terminology. Specifically, the word mastery really speaks to me, as well as the word shortcut. Mastery is just such a Capricorn, Saturnian, gate 54 term, gate 54 being like the gate of the ascended master, which if you don't know, that's my conscious sun, that's my Capricorn sun. And as a person with 6 Capricorn placements, 4 additional 10th house placements, and, 2 additional, Aquarian placements, all of these things ruled by Saturn. I am very Saturn ruled. I love to focus on mastery, but I like to go fast, right? I like to take the shortcuts and skip the steps. And so the intention of this podcast is for each of these episodes to kind of be these little sound bites and these little shortcuts into greater mastery of your own. Let me give you the cheat codes and the maps to the steps that I skipped and all of that good stuff. So that's a little bit about the name. I'm sure we'll get more into it later, but if you're wondering what that meant, that's what it means. And without further ado, let me spend some time telling you a little bit about not where I am rather, but how I got to where I am. Maybe we can talk about where I am later as we get into other podcasts, like what the business is and all that good stuff. But I think it's important to kind of set a, context of, where I am. Sorry, I keep saying where I am, how I got to where I am, and all of that. So let's just get right into it. So I am one of 4 children to 2 parents that I am grateful to say are still alive and hanging around and just wonderful. And I'm the second oldest of 4. I have 3 brothers, so I'm the only girl, and we are originally from Venezuela. I currently live in Boston, Massachusetts. That's where I'm recording this from. But we all actually were born in Venezuela. We moved when I was 7 years old, and we actually moved to the US, to Houston, Texas, specifically, if you're curious, literally 1 month, almost exactly to the date before 9/11, which is actually kind of close. 9/11 is in like a few days. But yeah, 22 years ago, we moved to the US. And I just, hats off to my parents, because moving to another country by yourself when you were like in your mid 30s and you have 4 kids under 10 and you're fleeing a country that is not doing so hot, and you get to like this promised golden land of another country, and then 1 month later, the biggest terrorist attack on that country happens. I mean, I'm just in awe of them, and I'm so grateful, because we definitely got some amazing opportunities living in this country, and I'm just so grateful that they stuck it out. But yeah, that's a little bit of my like cultural background and history. Grew up in Houston, Texas after having moved there from age 7. Lived in a beautiful home, you know, well off, beautiful, you know, suburbia in Texas, just wonderful. You know, we can definitely talk about my middle school trauma another time, you know, going to school. We don't have to get into how I had no friends. It's fine. We'll talk about it later. But that's kind of the context. That's where I grew up. And as a kid, I was always into marine science and like the environment and animals. And I just felt very connected to nature. Maybe it's an earth sign thing. I'm not sure. Well, okay, we'll get into marine science in a second, or like this thing that I'm going to say in a second. But yeah, anyway, so I was always into marine science, and always as kind of a scientific thinker, and always a questioner. And something that really kind of changed the journey for me was at age 14, I had kind of a lot of things happen in that year. Maybe it's the second Saturn cycle thing. As a Saturn ruled person, I'm going to talk about Saturn a lot, I guess, in this podcast episode. But at age 14, a lot of things happened that really, made me who I am today. I actually was just in New York over this past weekend in like current time, celebrating one of my best friend's 30th birthdays, and she asked us to go around and share during brunch, like, you know, what we would have, the theme of her party was 13 going on 30. And she was asking us like what would we have said to our 13-year-old self? What are we going into age 30 with? And what was our favorite age between 13 and 30? And everyone was like, my favorite age is now, which like same, like obviously this is the best year of my life because life just keeps getting better and better and better. But I chose to not just say the same answer. I was like, well, the second, I guess, favorite year of my life I could say was age 14 because it was just such a transformative year for me. So here I am, age 14, and it's like the end of the year, 2008, and I am at the Jingle Ball concert in Houston. So I think like, I don't know, Rihanna, Chris Brown, whoever the people were that were popular pop stars at the time were playing at this show. And I'm sure it was a great show. I'm a huge fan of live music and concerts, and we can get into that later in terms of like my gene keys and why that's a thing for me. But I left that concert and I was handed a PETA flyer. PETA, I forget what it stands for, but it's like PETA, whatever these folks are. And I kind of flipped through this flyer and I saw like pictures of like baby chicks being ground up because they were male and they weren't going to be useful because they wouldn't be like laying hens, and just, you know, pigs like squished together, and like, I don't know, just like horrific imagery of animal like slaughterhouses and things like that. And I in that moment just decided I am going to be a vegetarian. I will no longer eat animals. And somewhere in that like following couple of months, so maybe like just as I was starting to turn 15, so 14 to 15, I had started to go through my confirmation process because I grew up Catholic. I'm from Venezuela. Catholicism is very prominent there, and my family is a traditional Catholic family. Actually, my older brother is currently in formation to become a Catholic priest. He's a couple years in, maybe 3 or 4 years in. So Catholicism is totally a part of my family. I grew up around it. And so part of the Catholic process of becoming Catholic is, you have your baptism when you're a baby, you have your first communion, maybe, between ages like, 6 to 10, something like that. And then around this age, 14, 15, first years of high school, which are 14 and 15 in America, you do something called confirmation. You kind of confirm your faith. And just going through that process, I mean, already if we go back to when I was going to like Sunday school in like 7 or 8, I was always questioning this kind of stuff. And I was like, I don't know about this. Like, this doesn't like necessarily resonate with me. Like I can think back to like being I don't know, 7 or 8, however old I was, and being like, I don't know. But specifically around age 15, doing this confirmation process, there were so many moments where I just felt so disillusioned. In general, I felt like everything felt really forced, and like the community felt really forced, and it all felt so boring. And I was like, God, this could be so much more interesting. But specifically, I remember a day that really kind of changed everything for me. There were some things leading up to it, specifically, you know, kind of that weird like disconnect feeling. But also I remember there was a moment where we were going through, we were doing, not in confirmation, but just like my family, like we just went to church on a Saturday to do confession so that we could then take communion on a Sunday. And when you're standing in the confession line, there are these pamphlets that tell you, like, that give you like they're like, here's the list of like all the sins that you could have possibly committed that you need to share. If you've committed these, you need to share them with the priest so that you can get absolved of these, and then you can take communion the next day. So I'm like reading through this pamphlet. I'm like, all right, dude, tell me what my sins are. And I'm just sitting here again, like 15, 14, just kind of like blown away and scoffing and not really into what I'm reading. Like, it's like, making out too hard, or like having, you know, piercings on sexual organs and just things like that, where I was like, I don't know. How is that a sin? Like, what the fuck? So I just wasn't into it. And like shortly after that, we get to this, like, you know, I'm going to confirmation classes like once a week for like years or whatever. It's like the first 2 years of school, somewhere in that second year, maybe something like that. I remember there was a day where the Monsignor, which is like a certain higher hierarchy of like priest, was actually doing the class that day. And we were on I don't exactly know what the topic was that we were talking about, or that he was like, you know, preaching on. But there was just a certain moment where I remember all of us were sitting down kind of in groups and like circles, and he walked around and like pointed to each person and looked at them very sternly, saying, do you gossip? You're going to hell then. You gossip? You're going to hell. Do you gossip? You're going to hell. Just to every single kid in that class. And it's like, I just remember sitting there being like, bro, I cannot believe you're telling me that a God that is all powerful, all knowing, all present, right? That's the three, like omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, whatever. Like, he's everywhere. He's all powerful. He's all knowing. And who supposedly is love, right? That's the teaching in the Catholic Church. Like, God is love. You're telling me that guy that has all the power, all the knowledge, and all the love is looking at me, a 14-year-old in middle school in America in 2008, which is like the height of like fucking like teeny bopper magazines and like, you know, heroin chic look and like all that bullshit. And you're telling me that if I say that Susie's skirt like doesn't look good, that I'm going to be subject to eternal damnation and punishment, like, for saying that? My brain just kind of broke in that moment. And so from then on, from like 14, 15, I was this like vegetarian atheist that was just very like adamant and outspoken about my beliefs, and specifically that I was against my parents and my family's beliefs. And that's kind of how I want to give you guys the context of my kind of like spiritual background, because I run a spiritual business and it's a huge part of like where I am today. So you kind of need to know my story in terms of, how this all came to be. So, age 15, I'm just walking around being like, yep, you shouldn't eat animals, and also getting very much into like environmentalism, global warming as it was called back in the day before it was changed to climate change, and just questioning everything religious and basically being very against religion and even all spirituality. I was actually just super focused on the science because I was a scientist, right? I was a marine scientist my whole life. A little bit of a background on that. I did end up going to university for it, but growing up, I went to like I was lucky enough to get scuba certified by the age of 10. I went to like SeaWorld camp a couple years. I went to scuba camp, like scuba science camp. And it all stems from just in general love of the ocean. And when I was 5, I caught a fish with my hands at the beach, and I was like, okay, I am Ariel, I am the Little Mermaid, and so now I have to become a mermaid somehow. And I was just always obsessed with marine science. And as a quick caveat to the story, recently in present time, 2 weeks ago, I did this session, this soul animal session, which was recommended to me by Kinsey Madsen, who's a friend and a coach of mine, whose podcast I love. And she talked about it on her podcast. I felt super called to it. And lo and behold, my soul animal, which is like the frequency of the animal that my soul is, like in an unchanging way throughout all incarnations, is a motherfucking striped dolphin. Who is surprised? Marine science girl is a dolphin. I've had a dolphin ring for literally years. My friend Alicia just pointed this out to me a few days ago when I told her about this. I'm wearing the ring right now. So yeah, that's my marine science background. So here we are, age 14, marine scientist overall, vegetarian, environmentalist, atheist, just like all the things. There is a reason why in my parents' like bookshelf, my mom has stacks of books that are called How to Raise a Difficult Teenage Daughter. And like mother-daughter relationships and shit like that. Cause I was definitely a handful. Mom, if you're listening to this, love you. I'm sorry. It was part of my journey. It was part of our journey. What can I say? But yeah, so that's kind of the vibe. And, you know, continuing on, the intense atheism started to morph into kind of more now getting into like spirituality. Part of my other past life, you know, again, Manny Jen here, always a marine scientist, but I was also always a performer in the arts. Like I was a dancer and I sang. For a long time. When I transferred to my second high school when I was 16, I had to give up choir because I had to choose one or the other. And so I ended up choosing dance because that's what I did anyway. And I danced my whole life. I danced by the time high school was over, I was dancing in 4 different dance companies, one of them which was professional. Like I was getting like paid for this dance. But even as a kid, when I was in 8th grade, I sang in the Houston Grand Opera and also like as a working singer or whatever. So that was always a huge part of my life. I would love to get back into that like in my present life. I'm 29, by the way. We'll make it to 29. We're about 14 years in the past right now. But that kind of interest in dance, that was like my sport essentially. And I did not like sports at all, especially not in motherfucking Houston, bro. It's so fucking hot. One of the reasons I moved to Boston was to escape the heat. And if you're in Houston and you're playing sports, especially in the summer, like field hockey or cross country, when you are just dying outside, like you are swimming in humidity. It's gross. So at 15, I was delighted to find out that one of the sports I could choose for the fall season, which is the hot season in Houston, was yoga. So that's how I actually got into yoga. And that kind of, you know, as I did yoga throughout my high school years, that kind of got me more open to these like Eastern philosophies of spirituality. At 16, I ended up, my family joined a certain health club in Houston, and I ended up meeting someone who would become my mentor for many years, my yoga teacher. His name is Andrew Dugas, and he was a yoga teacher and continues to be a yoga teacher there. Amazing guy. And I met him when I was 16 and started doing a lot of his yoga. I started doing hot yoga, which is a little bit more on the spiritual side. Andrew's yoga, actually, I won't spoil it. So started to do, just getting really into yoga, getting really into meditation, and, you know, the astronomy books that I was reading at 14 and like the philosophy books that I was reading to find meaning at 14 kind of shifted more into like just getting interested in like Hinduism, Buddhism, like meditation, all that kind of stuff that the new age spirituality nowadays is kind of comprised of. Side note, one of my friends is like, her PhD is like on like new age spirituality, so I'm so excited for that dissertation to come out because I just can't wait to see like how she describes it, because I think it's very interesting. But yeah, so started to get into that, and at age 18, I went to Boston University for marine science. That was the first time I moved to Boston, and I chose BU because my dad went there. That's how I knew about it, and then I ended up choosing it because it was the only school out of the ones that I had chosen or the ones that I was like looking at that had a good marine science program and a good dance program. Not to major in or anything like that. I was not willing to take like dance history classes. What the fuck? I just wanted it to have a good like performing program so that I could continue to perform, rehearse, choreograph, and all that stuff, which I did. It was wonderful. I met so many great girls there and had a great time. doing my dance at BU. But yeah, so for the first 2 years, freshman, sophomore year, I was on my own. I was kind of, freshman year was really hard for other reasons, but I was really, especially sophomore year, I was really getting into like this Eastern spirituality thing. So I was kind of starting to move away from just the aggressive atheism, and I was getting really into like, like I said, meditation. I was getting into the concept of reincarnation. There were a couple things that led to this in general. I think just my tendency is to be spiritual. Again, if you know anything about astrology, it's like I have 6 planets in the 12th house. That's where all my Capricorn placements are. So lots of spiritual energy there. There's a lot in my gene keys and human design to describe, again, an interest in spirituality. I don't think that you have to have any of those descriptors, by the way, to be a spiritual person. I just happen to have that tendency energetically through my charts, through the energies that I got from being born when I was born. So one of the things is that I had a tendency to spirituality. Another one is rewatching Avatar: The Last Airbender as an adult, which I did the first week of my sophomore year. I remember it intensely, like rewatching that and being like, I kind of like, I'm digging this. And I already was sort of into like reincarnation and like chakras and shit like that. And this show is like making me really excited about it because it's hitting something deep in my soul. And again, if you follow me for any length of time before this, you will know that I am a deeply obsessed hopelessly head over heels in love Avatar: The Last Airbender fan, and have done a lot of things in that fandom. But yeah, rewatching that as an adult just kind of awoke some things in me. And during that time, I was smoking a lot of weed. I tried shrooms for the first time sophomore year. And so just, was getting into mind altering things, exploring different states of consciousness. I always felt like these types of mind-altering substances, plant medicines, were always medicinal, and more on the spiritual side and kind of with intention. And thankfully, that's always kind of what I attracted with that kind of stuff. That was always the people that I attracted, people that were a little bit more intentional with this, that wanted to ask deeper questions, that wanted to change their state of consciousness to kind of access different points of view and deepen their self-understanding and life understanding and more. So that was kind of my experience during that time, which was lovely. So by the time we get to 20, I am deeply excited about spirituality. I was like meditating at some of the temples in Boston, and I had organized myself in such a way so that my junior year, I would be able to take off my fall semester and spend it in Houston and actually do Andrew's yoga teacher training. How this came to pass is the summer after my freshman year, I was working out a lot at this club, and I went to like a fitness class, which I never do. I fucking hate fitness classes. I love yoga, and like that type of like dancey type of movement really suits my body. But I was like, whatever, let me try to work out. We have unlimited classes. I have tons of fucking time. Like it's summer after my freshman year. Let me just go and work out. And so I went to this workout class, and there was a sub there that day. So already things were strange. And at the end of that class, I'm like dying, right? Like I do not have like the skill of cardio at all. That is not my forte. Absolutely no stamina. And I'm dying. But this woman, this sub, I remember her name was Colleen something. I don't know. She came up to me afterwards and she was like, hey, you have a lot of energy. You should consider becoming a fitness instructor. And I was like, immediate sacral response, no. But, which is a great way that the sacral response works. It's like, well, not that. Hang on, though. You're just giving me something to respond to that I might mutate instead. So it's like, absolutely not. But I have really gotten into yoga, and that could be something that yoga instruction is something I should consider, or something I want to consider. And I didn't realize until now, that I would be interested in something like this. And I went over to Andrew and I was like, hey, like, where would you send me if I wanted to become a yoga instructor? What would you recommend? And he was like, well, if I were to send you anywhere, I'd send you to where I did yoga, but I am about to create my own teacher training. You would just have to take off your fall semester of your junior year, which is fall of 2014, if you're keeping track. And you could come. And I was like, done. And I came back, that like that winter, so like the beginning of 2014, and I was like January 2014, and I was like, hey, I did it. I took off like the fall, and he was like, oh fuck, I need to create this this training. So he did. And so at age 20, it's 2014, I've done 2 years at Boston University, and I do not go back for the fall. I take the semester off because I was overloading on classes like a crazy person, so I could do that. And I took some summer classes too to be able to do that. And I walk into my yoga teacher training on June, 10th, 8th, I don't remember what day it was, 2014, all shiny and happy and ready to learn about yoga, learn about anatomy. Andrew's a fucking genius at anatomy, and hopefully learn some more stuff about spirituality. The spoiler that I almost spoiled earlier is that Andrew does not teach spirituality and is actually very clear about removing it from his style of yoga. Specifically, I mean, there's lots of reasons personal to him. I won't speak for him, but one of the things that as a yoga better is his style, as a yoga better teacher, that we kind of say or just know as a philosophy is it just creates a barrier for it to be accessible to everyone. And specifically, if you think about the context of where Andrew's teaching yoga, it's like Houston, Texas, land of oil and like healthcare. And if you want to make a difference with Joe Schmo, CEO of Shell, and, Dr. Smith, who works at MD Anderson, like they are not going to they're not going to want to come to a yoga class where you're talking about like chakras and energetic meridians and opening your heart to the sky and like crying in Shavasana. Like that is just going to turn away the type of people that are a lot of people that are in Houston and beyond, a lot of other people that just aren't spiritual and don't resonate with that type of language. And therefore you might be missing out on impacting those people. Like those people need yoga too. And those people really need yoga better because yoga better is designed for those people. Very simple, very safe, designed for people that sit for a living, designed for the modern body, extremely anatomy focused in a way that you've never seen it before. I mean, I am just like a huge yoga better fan. And I absolutely love Andrew's work. Go check them out, yogabetter.com. I'm going to have them on the podcast as well, which will be great. But long story short, I actually kind of shut down my spirituality during that time because I was just so focused on the yoga and the measurable and the anatomy and the scientific aspect of it. And so if you're kind of keeping track, now there's like this like second shutdown of my spirituality. So we get to 14 where I'm like, absolutely not, no, religion isn't a thing. And then I open up to spirituality in general. And then I shut it down again about 6 years later at age 20 and just kind of stayed that way. And during that time, there were a couple things that happened that year that were also interesting and set me up for some stuff later. Number one is that it got me into the world of personal development. Andrew is very well trained in the world of personal development. And I don't even know how to describe the world of personal development, but it's just like the world where you are doing aggressive self-reflection work. You are doing uncomfortable work to be true to yourself, authentic, to self-express, to be honest, and not, just do the thing that everyone else does, the cookie cutter life. And specifically the type of work that he got me into that I owe a lot of my life to is like in-person personal development seminars. So if you've ever heard of like Landmark or EST, those are some of the programs that I did, not EST, but Landmark. I don't even think EST is around. People who know will know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what Landmark is, you should check it out. It's not for everyone. It's very intense work, very intense in-person, uncomfortable work with total strangers, and it's motherfucking life-changing. So that got me into that. I started doing a ton of Landmark work the year after that teacher training ended. So like January 2015 is when I got into it, so just as I turned 21. And during that year, we also were required to get jobs teaching yoga as part of the homework. Andrew has since removed that requirement and gone a lot easier on his future students. And I'm just, as a Gate 51 person, I'm always so grateful to have been part of the first group. But during one of those jobs, I ended up doing a yoga class where it was being filmed because it was for like an online, like a streaming service that for this yoga studio that I had gotten a job in. And the next day, the guy who was filming it came up to me and he was like, hey, I did your yoga class and I did that knee exercise that you taught. And I play soccer and I've had knee pain basically as long as I can remember. And after doing your class and doing that exercise, I can say that I didn't have knee pain today for the first time in like, I don't know how many years. And I told that story for such a long time because when I went back to BU, I ended up teaching yoga at school. I ended up teaching yoga after I graduated. And it was just the story that I always told when I taught the knee exercise, which if you want to know what this knee exercise is, go subscribe to yogabetter.com and check out their knee stuff because he teaches it in almost every single knee class because it's so fucking good. But yeah, so that's like 2014, age 20, you know, I get this spirituality shutdown. I get this like interesting experience with this story about the knee, and I get into landmark and personal development stuff, and just that's kind of how it's almost like I changed my spirituality and like meditative practice into like this really aggressive like personal development stuff. So I was still on like a self-reflection journey. It just happened to be a different way. The next 2 years were wonderful. After my summer or my fall in Houston doing Andrew's Yoga Better training, I did my study abroad program in the spring of 2015, which was a sailing program. Again, it was the first track that they had ever done on this particular, what's the word? Yeah, I don't know, sailing track, which again, K51, love to be first. And it was a marine science combined with a sailing program, which was 6 weeks on shore in Woods Hole in Massachusetts, which if you know anything about marine science, you know that's like the place for marine science. And the other 6 weeks were sailing a motherfucking tall ship from New Zealand to Tahiti. Absolutely insane, deeply spiritual experience. Even though I was not thinking of it as that, it was incredibly hard. When I say that we were sailing, I mean we were the crew and literally standing watch and hauling sails. And we were the only boats it was the only boat I saw, the only boat we saw for those 6 weeks that we were sailing. I was on I forget how long the boat was, maybe like 34 feet. 2-masted tall ship with 35 people total. And we were literally the crew, and we were also students, and we were also doing like research projects, and it was motherfucking amazing. And I might tell that whole story another time if you're curious. And then I came back to BU. I had another kind of study abroad experience the fall of my senior year, went to Belize, did some research in like the Mass Bay, and I did my senior thesis research, which was on oyster aquaculture and how they affect greenhouse gas cycling. And that was my senior year, and it was wonderful. And I got back into dance my senior spring, and it was just a great time all around. And by age 22, I graduated, and I graduated I had fulfilled this promise I had made to my high school self, which was to get honors cords. And I got my honors through doing the marine science, or doing my oyster thesis research. Because when I graduated high school, all of my friends, everyone in my class was like unprecedentedly like smart or something like that. We got some like insane number of scholarships based on merit, shit like that. I don't know, just everyone that I went to school with that was my grade was just a fucking genius. And so everyone was just like covered in honors cords. If you know what I'm talking about, in the US and maybe other countries, I have no idea how graduation like traditions work anywhere else. There is this, you know, you graduate with your like cap and gown. And then depending on the certain honors that you get these like beautiful golden ropes or silver ropes or whatever, maybe even other colors, that you hang around your neck to kind of to say and signify to others that you have an honor in that area. So, you know, people with like summa cum laude had like 3 cords or some shit like that. And I just remember like going to my friends and being like, where did you guys get those? Like, where are mine? And they were like, oh, you only get these if you have like honors in a, you know, either by a certain grade or some certain award or whatever. And to my dismay, I had 0 cords. And as a competitive person and person that cared about intelligence, I was like, what the fuck? I need to have cords. And so I wrote down on a sticky note before I got to school, like to like my freshman year of college, I wrote, think of the cords. And I had that sticky note on my desk for at least a year, maybe 2. I wish I knew where it was. But long story short, graduated from Boston University with honors in marine science. I also was the top of my class in marine science. I had the highest GPA, which something I'm super proud of. And I had won a couple awards for other things too. So long story short, what I'm trying to set you up for is I was feeling pretty fucking good. I was like, this is sick. I have a great degree from a great university, and I have not only a great degree, I have amazing accolades from this program, and I'm all set to go. And it was a great summer. First of all, if anyone remembers, can you think back to summer 2016? That was like the best fucking summer ever. Not just because it was the summer I graduated, but like millennial, like EDM music, like Avicii and shit. That was like the height of it. Pokemon Go came out, and not only did Pokemon Go come out, Pokemon Go came out when my family was spending 6 weeks in Europe because 3 of us graduated that year, my older brother and my youngest brother. We all graduated in 2016, so we took a big family trip. So just imagine, like, you graduated, you're feeling amazing, you're with your family that you love. I'm super close with my whole family. My brothers and I are very close, and we just are, everyone's just like so funny and so great and so smart. So we always have such a good time. We love to travel together, and we're lucky enough to do so. So you're with your family, you have all these amazing, like, you know, what is it? I was gonna say awards, and you're in like fucking Spain, and like Pokemon Go comes out. Like, bro, it was the best summer ever. It was such a good time. And then came back to Houston and came back to reality. So as a marine science student, I had not really received a lot of support on getting a fucking job. There's a lot of career counseling at, you know, universities like Boston University, but they're not for the bio students, the earth and sciences students. They are for the engineering students. They're for the business students, the accounting students. They are not for me and my STEM friends. Me and my STEM friends, we get told how to get into grad school and get a master's or a PhD or something like that. So I had no fucking idea how to get a job, and I just fully thought that my accolades would speak for me. And number one, I already knew, just something to say about this, I already knew that a job wasn't really for me. Part of my marine science experience is that I always knew that I wanted to do marine science and study it. And when I would say it to people, they'd be like, what are you going to study? And I'd say marine science. They'd be like, oh, it's so cute, but like, how are you going to get a job? And I would just be like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm gonna follow my passion. Of course it's gonna work out. Or they would say something like, oh yeah, like I also want to do marine science and now I'm an accountant. And I'd be like, God, these like losers, they like didn't like follow their dream all the way. They like didn't fulfill their passion. And I just never really thought more than just getting my degree. I was like, well, then it's, you know, once I have my degree, like then it's gonna work out, and like I'm gonna do great, and it's gonna be my passions. Of course it's gonna work out. So that was one thing. I just wasn't concerned about a job. And two, in general, as a marine scientist, like, it's like I knew that a fucking like 9 to 5 like corporate job like definitely wasn't gonna be for me. Like, that's why I studied marine science. Like, bro, you don't study marine science if you want to like work in an office building. Like, that's not what you study if you want that. So I knew that my job was not going to be like a corporate 9 to 5 in an office. Like, that to me, I knew was like death. At the very like least, when I imagined a job in marine science, I either was going to be like a killer whale trainer at SeaWorld, or I was going to be some like great scientist sailing the seas, or like living in like a scuba dive instructor. I don't know, something where I could like be in the ocean all the time. Hello, striped dolphin soul. And you know, that was like the worst I could imagine for myself. But the best was when in 2015, which was my senior fall, I discovered the term digital nomad for the first time. And I was like, whatever the fuck that is, like, I need to do that, because I don't want to work for anyone else. I want to work for myself, and I want to travel, and I want to have location freedom, and blah, 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 everything you've ever heard a digital nomad say. But it's true. We do exist, and we do genuinely want these things. They're not fake or for clout or for Instagram. So I graduate, and, you know, we're back to the story. I graduate, I'm feeling really good, and then I get back to the US and I start applying for jobs, and I'm like, wait, no one's actually giving a shit about my accolades, first of all. Second of all, it feels like I'm applying for corporate shit. What the fuck's going on? I'm like trying to figure out a resume and cover letter. I can't name two more soul-sucking items than that. So I'm trying to figure that out. That's not really working. And the whole time I'm like, but I don't really want this anyway. Like, I want to work for myself. I want to be able to travel. I want to have location freedom. Like, I don't want to, and I want to be rich. Like, hello, Capricorn Stellium. Like, I want to have a lot of money. And none of these jobs are seemingly going to get me anywhere. And it was just like a challenging time. A lot of my friends at the time had gone into like really successful careers right away. Like I had a lot of friends in like accounting, and friends that become like consultants right away. So here, like, you know, me at 22, like living at home, having just starting to apply for jobs, and then my friends have already been working a full summer getting a 6-figure salary. You know, it's early 20s in general. It's a very weird time. And my friends that weren't going right away into like great careers were like going to grad school, like going to law school, or going to, you know, getting their PhD. Like they were like, they seemingly, in my 22-year-old brain, like everyone was on a path of success except me. And I will say, hats off to my 22-year-old self, because I was like, fuck it, we're going to make this work. Like I walked across to like the local Pilates studio, walked in, asked for a job, got a job. That was my first job out of college. I started teaching yoga right away. I got a couple jobs teaching yoga at different studios. And I was doing a lot to try to discover what my passion was going to be. And not only my passion, what it was going to be as like a business. So, I'm so proud of myself. I took like courses on like sustainable design and like, like sustainability. And I even actually got an internship at an architecture firm thinking I was going to do sustainable design. I started to create a lot of business ideas in my head. There was this great Dave Hawken, I think, this guy who like created this machine that allows you to recycle plastic on your own and then like make stuff out of it. And he like release like the blueprint of it so you could like do it on your own, like in your home. Like he is this like guy from the Netherlands that won a ton of awards for that project. So go Dave Hawken. I'm sure he's still doing amazing environmentalist things in the world. So I was like trying to like think of like a plastic store to like create. I mean, I was doing all the things. I was creating blogs, some previous blog names. We got Shore Strider. That's my travel blog I was going to start. We have the Shussle, which is like some wordplay on hustle, where it was going to be like, I don't know, sort of like news situation, or maybe just like a personal blog. I don't really remember. Another marine science invention, Brine Babe. That was going to be my another travel blog, but specifically even more ocean focused, if Shore Strider wasn't already like marine focused enough. Anyway, so it started. If you follow my content at all, you know that I talk about as a manager and having like a graveyard of Instagram accounts and like websites. I am not joking. Those are like in the graveyard. Like those are real things that existed and like I probably still have like the fucking domains for and Instagram handles for. Yeah, so I was really doing my best, but I have to say my self-worth was tanking. Like I was like, people didn't care. I was not getting any sort of callbacks for anything. Second interviews, not even call for interview, not even like a fucking like, you know, rejection letter, which I think is just such a tragedy in the US. Like they don't even tell you no. They just like let your fucking resume just go into the ether. It's just not a good time, not ideal. So I was really starting to feel shitty about myself because, like I said, I was comparing myself to everyone else. I thought that my accolades were really going to save the day. No one really cared. And I was getting really stressed out. And I also thought that living in Houston was like a sign of failure because I was like, that's like home. Like, it's, oh my God. And then also like living at home with your parents, also a sign of failure. Obviously, those are not. But at the time, that is what I thought. And so eventually, I end up around 23. I end up getting a job at Apple Retail. My cousin had gotten a job there a couple years back while she was in college, and so I used that. She just spoke so well about that experience. So I used that reference to kind of get my foot in the door, went through the couple rounds of interviews or whatever, and ended up getting a job, which was so cool. Working at Apple was such a good time. They treat their employees amazingly well. You get a fuck ton of benefits, even if you're a part-time employee like I was, and like a part-time retail employee, like the lowest of the low, in the terms of like the Apple food chain. And you get tons of training. Like, it was just such a good time. And so I was having a blast. I was feeling a lot better about myself because I felt like I was really good at my job. I was really good at what I was doing. And if you're kind of keeping track, this is now my second like retail sales job, because the first one was working at the front desk of the Pilates studio. And bonus, it was actually my third retail sales job, because my first ever job was working at a scuba store in college selling scuba equipment. So I'm feeling really good at this job, because I feel like I've really gotten some, like I got a handle on sales, like I've done it before. And, I'm like a couple months in, and like I'm feeling good. I'm like the shiny new toy, like making lots of friends, whatever, having a good time. And then in the break room, we have a meeting. They were called the download, which I think is so fun. But we're having a download. And after the download ends, one of the like tech geniuses, the Apple bar geniuses, turns to me and asks, "Hey, how's yoga going?" And I turned to him and I was like, "How do you know that?" Because I don't think I had like maybe talked about it at that point, or maybe that much. Definitely not to him, because we had never spoken before. And he looks at me and goes, "Don't you remember me? I filmed that class for you like however many years ago." And I was like, holy fucking shit, you are so right. And so that guy ended up being the guy that did the film the yoga class, did the knee exercise, and got better. And I was like, oh my God, like I tell this story. And I told him, I was like, I tell the story of you doing that exercise and getting and feeling better all of the time. And, quickly we start to become friends. And, the combination of having pretty low self-worth because of my career. And again, my moon is in the 10th house. So of course my career is going to affect my emotional like well-being. And then feeling a lot better because I'm feeling really good at Apple, and I'm feeling fit because I do so much yoga and I stand all day for Apple and I feel hot and attractive. And then this guy comes in and we start becoming friends. Then he starts becoming more. Like this guy really kind of fed into my ego. And what begins is this kind of very intense relationship. It only lasted a couple months, spoiler alert, but it was very, very intense. And a quick context of this, my core wound in the gene keys, which again, we'll get into that if you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about some other time. But there's something called your core wound. It's like your biggest kind of challenge that you deal with, and it then becomes your vocation, your greatest talent, born out of your greatest pain. My greatest core wound is gene key 44, which is the gene key of karmic relationships. And I just, for as long as I can remember, like a relationship was always the goal. Like I just was dying to like be in love. Like I would fantasize about my husband, of course, was always Nick Jonas in my fantasies, and like the life we would live together and like how we'd be in love. Like just a relationship was always just such a big goal. And this guy was the first guy that I had met where it was like, oh, this is like the person for me. Not because he was actually the person for me or that was like intuition speaking at all. That was like fully a trauma bond. But he felt the same way. And that was the first time I had ever had someone else feel the same way. He actually felt more intense about it than me. He was very intense. I think he was a Sagittarius. Anyway. And yeah, and like we just formed this very intense trauma bond relationship that was like, I love you. Like, speaking of 44, it is 44 minutes that I'm recording this right now. 44 on like my second re-record, so I'm sure it's longer. If you look down at your timeline, don't be like, Maria, it's longer than 44. But right now it is 44 minutes. So anyway, but yeah, so very intense. We're supposedly in love, and that's like the guy I'm going to be with forever. That's my man. And throughout that time, with the intensity, some things started to not add up. He had shared his location with me, and like he'd tell me he was like gonna come out a certain time, and then he wouldn't, and like he would say like, I'm on my way, and then I'd look at the location and be like, you're not moving, I don't understand. So like things were starting to get a little sketchy. He wasn't from this country either, which my Sag North Node loves. A foreign person, my favorite. But his stories of like how he like became a citizen were like kind of sketchy, and they would like change every time. So a little bit weird. And my parents right away were like, what the fuck is this guy? And he was like a lot older than me. So my parents were like super sketched out right away. They were like, this guy's not good news. And I was like, no, that's my man. And like 2.5 months in, my mom just sits me down. She's like, look, this guy is not who you think you are. She had already kind of sat me down before, and that scared me so much that it prompted me into like using one of those like data brokers, which I forget what they're called, but it's like you can find them online. You pay like $20 and you put in someone's phone number and you find out all their information, which is why I don't give fucking any of my personal information to like anyone, because I know the power of these data brokers, and I'm sure any hacker could find me instantly anyway. But yeah, I'd put in his information. I had found like some sketchy stuff. Like I had found that like I'd found this like woman's name and like something else, and I was like, what's going on? But I was like, oh, this data broker's crazy. Like, you know, this doesn't make any sense. Like, this woman's name is like not even real. Like, she's like so much older, like whatever. Nope. Mom sits me down about a month after that. It's like 2.5 months into the relationship, and she's like, look, this guy is married to someone else. And she had already kind of been saying that, like, ask him if he's married. Like, how did he become a U.S. citizen? Like, da 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 da. And I was like, I was so in shock when she said that I just immediately discarded that statement. I was like, absolutely not. Like, that's not real. And she was like, no. Like, this is the woman. And she, like, pulls her up on Facebook, and it's the fucking name that I had found on the data broker, and it's, like, a picture of them. And I was like, what the fuck? I think this was like a Friday night or something like that. And then it was so intense. And then the next day we had this like all hands meeting at Apple. We like all had to like meet. And that was literally the last time I saw him. After that meeting, we had a conversation, and I just asked him one last time. I was like, so how did you become a citizen again? And he told me a completely different story than the other times. And I was like, all right, he is lying, and my mom is right, and this data broker is right, and this guy's married, I guess, and he's been lying to me this whole fucking time. And what proceeded after that was, you know, just to tie the whole story up in terms of like the logistics of it, I ended up just like breaking up with him via text. I ended up going to my managers at Apple and asking to be transferred to a different store, which was really sad for me, because when you finish working at an Apple store, they like clap you out. But because I was trying to hide from him, I like didn't get my clap out, and like because nobody knew that I was gonna be like working somewhere else, some fucking stupid person found out, this like little kid, and he like told, he was like, oh, I have a great time at like this other Apple. And I was like, dude, I literally was like in the group chat, I was like, bro, I literally was trying to like keep that a secret. Why did you do this? Anyway, and I had to transfer stores, and I was super heartbroken, and it was a really bad time. And you know, he exhibited some stalking behaviors, leaving stuff in my car, coming to my house, leaving stuff at the other Apple store I worked at. Of course he found out, and you know, we told the police. Obviously they didn't do anything, because police don't protect women and don't take stalking seriously. So of course I didn't do anything, whatever. But thankfully he kind of stopped doing that, and I never saw him again. We ended up having a phone conversation, and he never admitted to this until I called him out on it, and then he did admit to it. So it was real. He was married to someone else. And what that left me with, the kind of like why this is important to my journey, if you're wondering what this like tea is all about. Speaking of tea, I have some tea next to me. I might take a sip here in a second. Like, this is the thing as a new podcast recorder. I'm like, when I talk, I sip things constantly, and I'm like, do I need to like stop the recording every single time to like take my sip? Like, you guys don't want to hear that, right? Or do you? Like, is that fine? I'm gonna take a sip, just, you know, just to prove a point. Oh man, I hope I didn't sound disgusting on the mic. Anyway, we'll just leave it in just for sonic effect. But yeah, what's this tea all about, literally and figuratively? The figurative tea, the tea of the story, is that what that left me with, you know, the kind of shock, which, hello, 51 again, the kind of shock of that experience, what it really left me with was a complete breakdown in my trust of myself and my trust of my intuition. Because I had known that he wasn't necessarily being the most honest, and I had seen the data broker thing, and I had totally discarded that, and I had discarded my parents' opinions, people who care about me, people who know better. Not know better always. I definitely am not a believer in like, I'm your parents, so I know better. But like in this case, like, you know, they knew what was up. And after that experience, like I just fully lived in this state of not being able to trust myself. The second Apple store I ended up working at was really not a good time. And so thankfully, just out of the blue, started looking for jobs again, and got a message from what ended up being my future employer, who had this great tech startup. And he ended up scouting me, I think, and sending me an email, and I started working for them shortly after that. And that was a big part of my like tech background. But during that whole year that I worked at the tech company is called Source Water. I think now it's called Source Energy, but it was called Source Water when I worked there. During that whole time that I worked at Source Water, which, by the way, I don't know why when you listen to like people's stories, I don't know, famous people with podcasts and things to say, they like never say where they worked at. And like, I don't know why. Like, why do you not say it? Like maybe it's because going back to the data broker thing, now you can find out all my information. I don't know. But I am a believer in transparency. Obviously, to a certain degree, I do want to keep myself safe. But like, I have no problem saying I worked at Source Water, which is now called Source Energy. I don't know. Like, who cares? You can find it on my LinkedIn anyway. But yeah, so I worked at Source Water. I started out as a salesperson, customer success manager, and then got promoted to product manager, which was cool. But during that whole year, I just perpetually lived in this state of self-distrust. My self-worth was even lower. I felt terrified by the corporate environment, and it wasn't even that corporate. Like, I worked in like a fucking like, co-working space that was like very, like a WeWork sort of deal, but like even more familiar than that. It was so nice. It was such a good time. I met so many cool people there. But yeah, I just zero self-confidence, being forced to make cold calls in the like main room where everyone works that isn't in your company also, it doesn't really help with that. But it was just like not a good time. And specifically what I was really struggling with was I didn't know it, but was that trust in myself. And we got to I'm 24 at this time, so it's like the latter half of 2018, and my boss, my direct boss, so there was like the big boss who his name is Josh. He owns a company, he's funded and owns a company, and then there was like the guy in between, his name is Ben. Absolute geniuses, both of them. I was the third person on the team, so they were like these two guys that I worked with all the time. Ben, my direct boss, he did this personal development program called Ascension Leadership Academy, and it was based in San Diego at the time. It's now based in Austin. And he did it, and it was like, it's this very long program in San Diego. It's 5 weekends in San Diego across like 3 or 4 months or something like that. And then like you have like tons of calls in between and shit. Like, it was a lot. And he was like, I'm doing this because my friend did it, and he said it blew Landmark out of the water. And I was like, well, Landmark changed my fucking life like multiple times over. So what do you mean? And then he did it, and he was like, it's blowing Landmark out of the water. And I was like, what does that mean? I need to do this. And so I did that program, and it was a fucking amazing program. I spent a lot of time in California now that I think about it, but a lot of that was in San Diego, and now more so in LA. But anyway, spent a lot of time in San Diego, met a lot of amazing people. And here's what I'll say about this really quick. Part of why I really believe in these in-person like personal development seminars, I guess, like, you could sort of get this in like the online community and like online courses and stuff like that, where people do like make a good job about having a lot of community. But yeah, it's like these in-person, part of what I find so valuable about them is that you are just exposed to so many people who are very different than you, and they're sharing their stories like in a vulnerable way. Like, where else would you, as a 20-year-old, which is how old I was when I did Landmark, or like at this age, a 24-year-old, which is how old I was when I did ALA, like as a 20-year-old, 24-year-old woman, where else are you going to get to hear a 56-year-old man breaking down in tears about how he regrets not ever, having a clearing conversation with his mom, and now she's dead, and he didn't speak to her for the past 20 years because of one random fight at Thanksgiving. Like, I always use that example because I remember having that moment when I was 21 and being like, oh my fucking God, like, I cannot be like you. Like, I'm going to learn from your mistake, and I am going to do everything in my power to become someone that can be self-expressed, to be someone that can have hard conversations. And look, like, I'm not amazing at them, but I'm willing to have them, and I'm willing to get better at them. But yeah, so that's why I love these personal development seminars, especially when they're long and you get to know people like over time. Like, I got to know a lot of people over time at those programs. Amazing people that are just getting started in their careers, people who are super successful in their careers, famous people even, and you get to just know their souls and their hearts because you're sharing so vulnerably in these spaces. I mean, and you're learning so many amazing skills for life. So really great time. And At the very tail end of that program, like the second to last weekend, so the fourth of 5, on the fourth weekend, we did this exercise, and I don't want to like spoil it because maybe some of you are going to do it, but in that exercise, there were certain steps that led me to this moment that I'm going to speak about, where I confronted myself, essentially. There were other team members that were helping me with this. They kind of role play the person that you need to confront. And I thought I needed to confront my ex. And I did that. I did that with a team member, and it was really helpful. And the coach who was kind of watching this, after that role play was done, she asked a great question. She was like, who else? Who else do you need to talk to? And I was like, fuck, it's me. Myself. I need to talk to me. And she put in another person to role play to be me. And this is a sweet woman named Debbie. And I just like ripped into Debbie/me, being like, just saying all the things that I didn't realize I was holding on to. Like, how could you be so stupid? How could you not see this? This guy was lying to you. How could you not trust your parents? How could you not trust yourself? How could you like let these red flags go unnoticed? Like, you know, just this really big kind of self, like looking at myself in a mirror through another person in this exercise. And the like relief I felt after that experience, and the just like teary, you know, kind of possibility that you get after doing something like that, and just like the love that you feel. It feels like you're like it felt like there was something kind of like holding my heart down, and that experience allowed me to remove it and like be myself again, and be free. And yeah, like what I developed later, which is kind of the point of the story, but I'll just say right now, is like this idea of like, you can't really do anything if you don't trust yourself. Like, you can't like take any action or create anything or fucking do anything. Literally, I don't think you can do anything if you don't trust yourself. Anything that is worthwhile doing, or anything that is really in alignment with who you are. I believe. I think that you can. There's many things you can do to get to that place before you trust yourself that are obviously worth doing. But once you're there, it's like the steps you take in the life you live when you do trust yourself, I just think are so, yeah, much more in alignment and so much more meaningful and true to our soul and true to what we really want. So yeah, I felt that after that experience. And at the very end, the last weekend, it ended on January 6th, which is the day before my birthday, and specifically the day before my 25th birthday. My birthday is January 7th, if you're curious. So yeah, it was the day before my 25th birthday, and we did the last weekend, beautiful weekend, and there were some meditative exercises that we did during that weekend. One of those exercises was flipping to, I'm gonna spoil this one, too bad, was flipping to a page in the book The Prophet, which is a fucking excellent book that I had actually received as a gift a few years back from a guy that I was dating. And amazing book. I need to go back and I reread it all the time. That and The Alchemist are like two books that I reread for like every year for a couple of years. Yeah, The Prophet's a great book. And I forget which one was the page that I flipped to, but it was something in that passage about like sailing and like setting your own sails. And the kind of message I got from that was like, trust myself. Like, I need to trust myself. Like, it was something about like the self, like, if you know what The Prophet is how it's structured, it's like each chapter is like on something, like on marriage or on friendships, and I think this one might have been like on the self or like something like that, on children, on whatever, on work. So yeah, this passage was like on like setting your own sails and kind of sailing, and like as I was reading it, I was like, I need to trust myself. Yeah, trust myself. Like, that's what I need to do. Like, fuck, like that's what I need to do. And then we did this other exercise. It was a really nice visualization where we like find something and it has a message on it. And the item I found, I was walking on a beach, of course, dolphin, was walking on a beach, and I found it buried in the sand, like a gold ship's helm. And it was like handheld. It wasn't like a huge one. It was like a tiny ship's helm, like a wheel, like a ship's wheel, if you know what I'm talking about, like with the spokes and stuff. And a tiny one that you can hold in both of your hands that was golden. And in the center of it, it said, trust and go. And that became, this is 2019, that became my like life philosophy. I remember I was like, by the way, this well, hang on a second. What's the year? Yeah, so in 2019, perfect. So great. So in 2019, I had been teaching yoga for a while. I had been working part-time for Andrew for a bit, doing their marketing. And once January came around, I actually ended up quitting Source Water to work full-time as the director of marketing for Yoga Better. And so, and I was getting into, because of ALA, I was getting back into like just more self-development and like starting to kind of sneak back into spirituality. And I created my first vision board in a really long time in 2019. And I created it. I taught a vision board class for one of my friends, Danny, who had at the time this like really great women's like networking circle called Woman to Woman, which was such a cool idea. And she is no longer in Houston. She's off traveling the world doing amazing things. So I think that program has disintegrated, but I taught this like, excuse me, this vision board class for Woman to Woman, and I wrote trust and go at the top of it. And it was like my theme for 2019. Some of the YouTubers that really made a difference for me at that time were Michelle B and another girl named Eileen Zhu, and her YouTube is called Lavender, and both of them are kind of these like productivity and like personal development, self-reflection creators. And Lavender, Eileen, she suggested the idea of having a theme for every year. So that's where I got that from. And so trust and go was my theme for 2019. And so if trust and go was my theme, I needed to trust myself that I didn't want to fucking work at an oil and gas startup, which is what Source Water was. And I said I wanted to follow my dream, which was to build Yoga Better and like do that whole thing and get into like building that business. And I wanted to teach like yoga retreats in different parts of the world and spread the Yoga Better message. And it's cool because now I can still spread the Yoga Better message. I just don't necessarily need to work for them full time and I can do my own thing. But yeah, so that was like the first big like leap of faith of trusting myself that I took in 2019. And that year was such a beautiful year. I ended up getting into a really healthy relationship at that time. So I dated, that was my German ex. If you know my story, I dated this German guy for a couple of years and ended up living in Germany, which we'll get to in a sec. But that's when we started dating, was 2019, January of 2019. And so I was in this beautiful, healthy relationship. I was doing more of like passionate work. Like I was kind of tuning into sacral energy. Like I knew that if it wasn't something I was passionate about, that I wasn't going to be able to work in it. And so for me, like Source Water, oil and gas, tech shit, like was fun, but it wasn't my sacral joy. And following my sacral at the time and trusting and taking action, which is trust and go at the time, was work for Yoga Better. And so I was getting into yoga and I was doing that more. And I was like really excited about that. I got so much creative freedom to like do marketing things and whatever, which was really fun. And I was getting into manifestation again. I had already known a little bit about manifestation before, but just, you know, from the years of in 2014, you know, 5 years back, like in Boston and whatever, just kind of, you know, when you get into meditation and stuff like that, you tend to kind of learn about manifestation as well. So I was getting into that and yeah, so getting into manifestation and started to slowly kind of open back up to spirituality through manifestation specifically. I was like binging like Eileen's podcast, and then I found like a manifestation person on that podcast, and then because I was trying to grow this like business with Yoga Better, I was like listening to business podcasts, and like throughout doing all of that and getting into manifestation, I ended up discovering human design. So a quick intro, human design, it's a system that borrows from a couple other systems. It's a metaphysical system based on your birth time that gives you a blueprint of how your energy works. And so I discovered human design. I discovered it on a business podcast where she was kind of spiritual or whatever, and she would interview people and kind of cosmically profile them. Like, hey, you're coming on. Like, what's your Enneagram? What's your Myers-Briggs? What's your astrology? What's your human design? And I remember the guest she had was a projector, and I was like, what the fuck does that mean? And I was like, all right, moving on. And then I got really into To Be Magnetic's work, or Lacey Phillips' brand, To Be Magnetic, which is amazing, and I continue to be a To Be Magnetic person to this day. So we're like 4 years into my To Be Magnetic journey. Amazing work. And at the time, she doesn't have this anymore, but at the time you had to pull your human design chart to do her workshop, because she was, you know, essentially the purpose was to see if you were a specific or a non-specific manifestor, which is like a Jenna Zoe interpretation of the perspective arrow of the third transformation, which is like not raw, not source material. It's like Jenna Zoe stuff. And since then, like we haven't, they kind of got rid of that. But yeah, so that was like my second time discovering human design. And then, you know, the whole year happens, like, you know, it's all 2019. I work for Yoga Better the whole year. I'm in this great relationship. I'm kind of getting into manifestation. I'm getting into, you know, just spirituality concepts, things like that. I'm journaling. I'm meditating more. I'm like, oh, I got really into Gala Darling and like tapping. So I was doing tons of EFT tapping. And then she would do these like, you know, tarot card pulls and like things like that. So total vibe. Really was a good time. And then, yeah, we get to January of 2020. And if you've kind of noticed a theme, every January I kind of blow up my life, because I just, for so many reasons, but it's like New Year energy. It's also New Age energy, in the sense of like my birthday is January 7th. So every year in January I become a new age, and I'm that whole age for the whole year. Very happy for my very organized Capricorn self. And I just have like basically all my chart in like all my gates and stuff, all my placements are basically all in the quarter of mutation in human design. So I just am here. I have the channel of transformation. My conscious sun is in the channel of transformation. I have that gate 5 times. I just am here to transform and whatever. So you know, January 2019, I blew up source water. I went to work for Yoga Better. And then January 2020, I ended up quitting Yoga Better. We were just like, we just wanted different things for the company. I wanted to go a certain way, and there was a different focus for the owners, Andrew and his wife Andrea, who are again lovely and amazing, and you guys will meet them at some point on this podcast. And of course we didn't know that the pandemic was coming, but I quit with no plan. I just knew that I wanted to go in a different direction. And by that time I had been dating my ex for about a year, and he needed to move back to Germany in the next 6 months. And so we started to figure out, how the fuck am I going to get to Germany? I actually am a Spanish citizen, but at the time our Spanish citizenship was on hold, because we had also gotten an American citizenship after the Spanish one. And they were like, whoa, you have like way too many fucking passports. I don't know if we can like give you another one. And so they were like reinterpreting this law. So I didn't actually have a way to get to Germany. Like I needed to do it in the way that a non-EU citizen would. Like you either get a job to sponsor you, or you get a student visa, or you get a language class visa, or an au pair visa, or a fiance visa. We even looked at that. And so that's kind of where I was like in January of 2020. Like I quit Yoga Better, and I was like, all right, like I want to like change my career focus here. Like, you know, director of marketing, not the position for me. And I also want to move to Germany. So how can I do that? And I had already started doing some freelance work because I was doing marketing and graphic design and web design stuff for Yoga Better. I started to do that as freelancing. So my friend Mari was my first client, and then my friend Danny was my second client. Here's Danny again. And I started to get some kind of like marketing and web design clients for myself. So I was like, all right, well, let me keep like freelancing as I try to figure this out. And I mean, I tried a couple things. I applied to a couple jobs in Germany, like product. I tried to get back into tech. I even toured in February. We went to Germany to sort of figure out this like fiance visa thing, and also look at some other things. And I even toured like a graduate program and things like that. It was very cool. It was like a tech and design and thing, you know, sustainability thing, which was a fun time. But none of it really felt real, or not real, but none of it really felt like what it was that I wanted to do. And then I made it all the way down to the very first episode on the To Be Magnetic podcast, which is called Expanded. And if you've ever listened to the entire podcast, the first one is an interview with human design teacher Jenna Zoe. And in that podcast episode, she talks about the 5 human design types. And I already knew that I was a manifesting generator. I just had no idea what the fuck that meant. And hearing her talk about Manny Gens was one of the 3 things at that time that really changed everything for me. Specifically, I remember what she said is that they're, you know, multi-passion, multi-hyphenate, the things that we always kind of associate with Manny Gens. And she said that many gens work in like bursts of energy. Like some days they can work for like 16 hours a day, and then other days they're going to work for like 4 hours or not at all. It's like, and she said like, I don't know if this is what she said or this is what I took away from it. This was like, again, 3.5 years ago, 3 years and 9 months ago, if we're talking about January 2020. She said, I lost my train of thought. She said, oh yeah, like these people are not necessarily designed to work in 9 to 5 environments, because I think she really did say this, like because they work in these bursts of energy, like they're not meant for this like consistent 9 to 5 force thing. And I was like, oh my God, someone said it. Like that is why I feel like this. Fuck my life. Like I can't keep pretending like I actually give a shit about working in a fucking fixed like timeline or in a fixed schedule for someone else, where I have to be somewhere gross. Like I want to work from home or work from wherever the fuck I want. I don't want to have to like be forced to go to a certain office or some shit every single day. And it was just so fucking validating to hear that. It was so validating. So that was like the kind of the first of 3 straws that started to break the camel's back on doing anything but just working for myself. I'll share the other 2. The second one was a great coaching session with one of my, she was a contractor at Sourcewater. She's an amazing designer and life coach, and she's super amazing, multi-talented, 3-5 generator, super smart. This woman named Anya Kolak. I think her website is Anna Kolak, but I was introduced to her as Anya, so I just say her name Anya. So Anya, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry I keep calling you Anya. I don't know if you want to be called Anna, just let me know. But anyway, Anya and I did a session, and she asked me a couple really great questions. Not caveat, but context, she's a line 6 vocation. So for you line 6 vocations, listen up, because this is a great use of that vocation style. So we were talking about, I was like, I don't know, like what do I want to do? Do I want to work here? Do I want to work there? Do I want to apply for this job? Do I want to get a whatever? Just I was sharing my whole kind of like issue of not knowing what to do in terms of like career and how do I get to Germany and all of that. And she asked me 3 questions. I don't know how many, whatever. She asked me some questions. Here we go. The first one, she asked me to describe what it is that I wanted. And I was like, well, I want to have flexibility. I want to be able to travel. I want to have kind of time freedom and location freedom. I'd love to own multiple homes in different places. I do feel like my soul's kind of spread apart in different parts of the world. I want to be able to my family lives all over the world too. I want to be able to travel to see them. I want to have creative freedom, blah, blah, blah. My whole vision, whatever. Second question, very important question. Do you think you could do that more easily if you worked for yourself or if you worked for someone else? And I was like, well, obviously if I work for myself, like obviously that would be easier. And I was just very sheepish about it. And she was like, okay, yeah, great. Third question, most important question of all. Do you think you could do that? And that moment also changed everything for me. I was like, fuck yeah, I can. What? Why have I been pretending like I can't fucking start my own business and work for myself? Like, what? It was just a very like, duh, I'm like destined for this shit. Like, how have I been pretending otherwise? And so that was a super fucking helpful moment. I still didn't know what the business was going to be. We'll get to that in a second. But I was at that moment, I was like, yeah, business. So again, we now have this like maiden gen thing of like, it's better for you to work for yourself and have that freedom. And then we have this like Anya thing of like, yes, like, I can do it. Like I can work for myself, giving very much gate 14 gift of competence, rather than compromise. And then there was this kind of third moment. I don't really know when the moment was, but I remember one of my issues of thinking of working for myself, where that essentially one of the things that was holding me back was like, well, if I have to like work for a company, how the fuck am I going to explain this gap in my resume? That's going to be so embarrassing and blah, blah, which first of all, not even true. First of all, why the fuck would it be a gap? It wouldn't be a gap. It would just be like, I worked for myself during this time. And second of all, why the fuck is that embarrassing? That's dope as shit. Like, I guess in the moment I was like, oh, I will have failed if I have to like apply for a job again. And then I wouldn't say that I work for myself because I wouldn't want to put that failure down there for people to see, when it's like, that's not really like a thing. Like if you ever work for yourself and then you choose to work for someone else again, like get a job or whatever, like you will have with you like a myriad of skills that you wouldn't have had otherwise if you hadn't worked for yourself. So it is like worthy of putting on your resume, and it's not a failure. So But that was the thing that I really was worried about. And there was some moment at some point, I don't know exactly know when, but I just decided that I just could not give a rat's ass about a resume. I was like, fuck a resume. I never want to put together a resume ever again. I never want to write a cover letter ever again. Like I am done writing cover letters. I am done with resumes. I am done with LinkedIn. Jesus motherfucking Christ. And all those three came together to allow me to feel safe and confident and like that and like true to myself, enough to start my own business. It's funny because I share that story actually on Anya's podcast on her first episode, which is called Starting. I share about these 3 straws that kind of broke the camel's back. So yeah, those are all the things that kind of led me to starting my business. And so if we kind of do a little bit of a recap, how do I recap this like hour and a half story? But there's this, kind of journey. There's a spiritual journey, right? Of like, leaving behind my indoctrinated faith and then getting into spirituality, shutting that down, getting back into it again. Then there is this like, career journey of like really following my sacral passions, like as a mani-gen, like I was like, as a generator type, like I wanted to study marine science, like I wanted to study things that I was passionate about. When I couldn't do that, I, did everything I could to get other skills. And I continued to follow my sacral joy. Like I started working for the Pilates studio, didn't like that, worked for Apple when that didn't light me up anymore. I worked for SourceWater when that didn't light me up. I don't work anymore. I worked for Yoga Better when that didn't light me up anymore. I worked for myself. It's like I followed that sacral joy, kept taking leaps. I kept taking shortcuts, you could say. And eventually it all led me to this moment of like discovering human design, having this clarity that I don't give a fuck about a resume, and having a more important clarity that I could trust myself to do it, that I was capable of starting my own business, and like that clarity of like, that's what I want. And here you are, it's like January or February, something like that, 2020. And I'm like, yep, I'm going to start my business. And like I said, I'd already been kind of freelancing in graphic design. So that's kind of what I started with. I started doing that for other people. And eventually in June or something, no, I think it was April. Yeah, April of 2020. I committed to a mastermind. It was the like bossbabe.inc mastermind at the time. If you know those girls, they have like millions of followers on Instagram. I committed to their mastermind to specifically build my coaching business. So that's like when that started. I think the mastermind started in like June. I don't know why June stands out to me at a certain time. Maybe like I started the mastermind in April, but then by June I was like, yep, like I don't know why. That's a thing for me, June 2020. But yeah, and the reason I chose a coaching business and I knew that I wanted to do that is because I am the personal development girly that I've always been. Like at this point, I'm 25 and I've been doing like since 14, so like 11 years, right? I've been in a very intense like self-reflective state, questioning everything, reading philosophy and astronomy books and like trying to find meaning in life. And then since 20, doing yoga and meditation and then like personal development seminars and stuff. Like I always knew that like coaching was going to be a thing for me. Once I got into the personal development seminars, I started doing a lot of coaching, like because you do them in those seminars and you get practice. And I was always like picked as like the head coach or like the leader of my group or whatever. Like, and I love that. I very much have leader energy and coach energy and teacher energy in all of my charts. And so coaching just felt like a natural thing for me. I understood it. I understood the business. I understood the online business of it. It felt easy to reverse engineer. And that's how I got started. And the last bit of the story is, how did I get into human design? And the type of coaching that I started, it was self-trust coaching, by the way. So that's why that story with my ex was super important. The ex from Apple. And that whole kind of like shocking experience, and then learning to rebuild my trust in myself after ALA. That whole year of 2019 was rebuilding trust in myself. When it came time to 2020 and kind of thinking of what I was going to coach on, I was like, self-trust, obviously I have to teach this. And I ended up developing these great frameworks. And if you listen back to those initial podcast episodes, like interviews that I had, not that this is a new podcast in 2023, but my podcast interviews, I have somewhere else. I'll link them below if you want to. I have a whole playlist of every podcast I've ever been on. If you listen to those early episodes, you'll hear me talk about self-trust and the framework that I built and like how I think about it. And that was my coaching business at the time. And so because I got into self-trust, I also got intensely into intuition. And that really kicked off my spiritual journey too. Like 2020 was a big spiritual initiation for me. I mean, you know, Saturn was in Capricorn, Pluto was like getting into Capricorn too. And like, you know, that's my 12th house and my stellium and all that shit. So there's a lot of like things to kind of point to. Specifically, I think it was a Saturn transit, but to point to like a spiritual initiation. Also, I started my business, which is like the biggest spiritual initiation of all. Hello, Pearl Sequence. And yeah, so I started getting really into intuition, and what that ended up having me do was like just search intuition on Instagram, which like who searches anything on Instagram? I don't know. But I typed in intuition on Instagram, and I found the person who ended up becoming my first human design teacher formally in Carpenter, because her handle at the time was Intuition Lifestyle. And I followed her. I just checked. I liked the name. I liked the handle. I was like, great, Intuition Lifestyle. That's what I'm trying to do. Intuition and live my life by it. And I found out, and I saw that she was teaching human design. I was like, oh my God, yeah, that thing that I love, like that I'm getting into, like, of course, oh my God, da, da, da. And so I started following her, and I, throughout the summer, really got into like self-study of human design. And like I had already been looking at it since January when I heard that podcast, and I really started diving into it. But then the summer got even more into it, reading tons of stuff. I was doing readings for my friends just for free, like being like, what's your brother's birth time? Let's look it up, like whatever. And in July, I believe, she opened doors to her human design and Gene Keys coaching certification for the first time. And after riding a very aggressive emotional wave that took me about a month to ride, I ended up saying yes to that program and joining it. I think it took like 9 months or something like that. And getting certified in human design and Gene Keys coaching from Eden's perspective. And I initially took that certification because I was like, well, if I'm going to teach people how to trust themselves, I have to teach them, like if I'm going to teach trust and go, I have to teach authority, which is the trust part, and strategy, which is the go part. Like I can't just teach trust and go. I have to teach you your version of trust and go. I have to teach you your version of strategy and authority. How do you trust your intuition, and how do you take action? So that's what I wanted to take that training for. I didn't know what the fuck Gene Keys was. I discovered that during that time, which was dope. Love Gene Keys. That's what kind of more what I'm focused on now. Sorry, I'm just taking a B-reel, you know, got to be on time for these things. Oh my God, I look crazy. But, you know, I wanted to document this moment. But yeah, so I ended up taking that certification for the purposes of enhancing my self-trust coaching. I also felt like having some sort of certification was valuable, even if certifications are just made up. But I was like, well, at least I need to have like one. You know, I've been coaching for years, but like not formally certified in anything. But what ended up happening is I just kind of fell in love with human design and kind of just fell in love with Gene Keys and really just kind of focused on that and dropped any sort of self-trust coaching. Like my first coaching program was called Radical Self-Trust, and I ended up having 3 clients go through that, which was so fun. And that was it. I think I made a course on it, but like most like that was like maybe fucking 1% of my business. Like everything since then has all been human design stuff, and Gene Keys stuff. And that all started around September of 2020. So, oh my God, exactly 3 years ago. So I've exactly for 3 years now, I've only focused on human design and Gene Keys specifically. And that, my friend, is how we got to where we are. Hello, welcome to where I am now, which is I'm a human design and Gene Keys business owner. I'm a teacher, reader, coach, and app creator. I have a whole app called the Cosmic Compendium that was designed for human design and Gene Keys professionals and highly dedicated students. I've made over $400,000 in the past 2 years. I really only made like $15,000 my first year of business, but the business is you know, a 400K business. It's cool that like the next 100K milestone, I'll be able to say $500,000. That sounds like a vibe. And I only say the numbers just so you know where I'm at. I think it's just one of the measures of like someone's journey. It's not the only important thing, but we need money to live. I will be talking more about that later. And yeah, I've served, gosh, hundreds. Are we in the thousands of people yet? I don't know, through my programs. And this is what I plan on doing for a long time. Well, I always plan on being an entrepreneur. You can definitely count on that. I will never work for anyone else. I will always work for myself. I believe I have a body of work to develop, and this podcast is a huge part of that for me. Like, I have so much to say, so many experiences, so much to teach, and my purpose is in my voice, in the gene keys, and I believe I really am here to speak, and I have so much to share with you. But I do see human design and gene keys being the future of my business for the foreseeable future. I don't see any change in that. I'm super excited about it still. I think I have a lot more to share in other areas. I have business courses. I have a graphic design course coming too, things like that. I have lots of other skill sets and things to share. Again, so much of that coming through Shortcuts to Mastery, which is going to be such a vibe. But that is the context. That is the catch up. We can totally get into my business journey. Like, I have fully skipped past like so much of it. So, building the compendium and other things like that, I'm so willing to share if that's exciting to you. But I think, to kind of know my context, you need to know that I'm, from Venezuela, moved to the US, became a vegetarian, environmentalist, atheist at 14, and all the things that we just recapped. And so I hope you got to know me a little bit better through this. I'd love to know you better. So definitely, if you enjoyed some of this, or saw yourself in some of this, or just laughed at any of it, let me know over on Instagram at by Maria Henning. If you share this podcast that you're listening to it, I will post or I will repost you if you tag me on your stories. But I just love to hear what you got from this, and especially if you've been following me for a long time and you've been in my world. I'd love to hear from you and what you thought, and if you learned anything new about me. But yeah, that is it for this first episode of Shortcuts to Mastery. Thank you so much for joining me. What I'm working on right now is a gene key certification style reader training called the Master Key. I don't know when this podcast episode will be released. It might be released while that program is still enrolling. It could be after. My goal is to do it before enrollment closes, but that's something I'm working on right now, which is super exciting. Link in the description, show notes, or whatever for that. And that's a big project, and that's going to be a lot of fun. The other big project is this podcast, which has been a lot of fun. This second, I recorded this story already once, and it was really grueling and really hard, and it didn't feel like my voice. It didn't feel like how it came out just now, which was way better and way more fluid and way more true and authentic. All of it felt exactly how I wanted it to come out. And I kind of I stuck with that, or not like struggled with it, but I just marinated on it for a bit. I was like, oh, like, since that was the first time, like, is that the most authentic version? Like, should I release that? But no, I believe that going back to Gene Key 14 of competence, like, the first time you do something is not going to be the best time. And so I needed to kind of like sit and marinate on it for a little bit, and then record this on a day that felt like my voice was going to come out in the most authentic way that it could. And I really feel like it did in this podcast episode. So this one let me tell you, the other one was grueling. I took so many breaks. It took like 2.5 hours to record, probably the same amount of time. And this one was all done in one sitting, and it felt so much better, and it felt so much easier, and it was a fucking vibe. I can't wait for more podcast episodes. Honestly, this was a lot of fun, and this is how I imagined this podcast to be. There's been so many moments where I'm like, oh, I wish I just had the podcast running up already because I have so much to say about this one topic or whatever. And like, this is what I was imagining. This is what I was imagining when I was imagining things like that. Like, oh, I just wish I had it up so I could record what I want to say. So yeah, that is the current status of like where I'm at with the things I'm creating, including this podcast and including this Gene Keys reader training. And I'm just so grateful that you stuck around. I'm so grateful you listened. Keep an eye out for more episodes. There should be some more out right now that you can go and keep listening to. Let me know what you think. Give me a shout out on Instagram. I'll repost you because I love to do that and connect with you. And if you're listening to this in the future, like way, way, way the future, and you've like binged all my podcast episodes and now you're at the bottom, I see you as well. Hello. Good to meet you from the future. And that's it for now. All right. I will see you next time, my friend. Thank you so much for joining. And yeah, all the best. All right, my friend, thanks for joining me on another ride aboard the Shortcuts to Mastery spaceship. You can get started on your human design and Gene Keys journey with me today for free by going to mariahenning.com/chart, which is linked below. If you're a visuals lover as well as an audiophile, then definitely join the party over on Instagram at @ByMariaHenning for lots of fun and beautiful educational content. And to tag me in the stories with the episodes you listen to so I can repost you. And of course, if you're here, you know it totally rocks for podcasts to receive great ratings, so if you're feeling warm and fuzzy and want to share, I'd be eternally grateful. I can't wait to connect again. Thanks for being here, and until next time, here's to everything going easier, better, and faster than expected. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. Hello, my name is Maria Henning.